You wake up every morning with that familiar weight pressing against your chest. The alarm goes off, and before your feet even touch the floor, your mind is already calculating. How much do I need this month? How many more hours can I work? How many more clients can I take on? You are running, always running, chasing after income like a man dying of thirst in a desert, desperately reaching for mirages that disappear the moment you think you have grasped them. You work harder than anyone you know. You sacrifice time with your family. You push through exhaustion. And yet at the end of every month you find yourself in the exact same place, or worse, watching your efforts evaporate like morning dew under a scorching sun. The bills pile up, the unexpected expenses arrive like uninvited guests, and that dream of financial freedom, that vision of providing abundantly for your family and fulfilling the calling God has placed on your heart, feels more distant with each passing day. You tell yourself that if you could just earn more, if you could just land that next deal, if you could just get that promotion or sign that client, everything would change. But deep down, in that quiet place you rarely allow yourself to visit, you know the truth. You know that something fundamental is broken in your approach, that you are trapped in a cycle that no amount of hustle can break, that you are building your financial house on sand and every storm threatens to wash it all away. The frustration burns inside you because you are not lazy, you are not irresponsible. You pray, you tithe, you try to honor God with your work, and yet prosperity seems to be a promise made to everyone but you. You watch others who seem to work less and have more, and you wonder what you are missing, what secret knowledge they possess that keeps eluding you no matter how many books you read or sermons you listen to. You feel the weight of being a provider, the responsibility of stewardship, and the fear that perhaps you are failing at the one thing that matters most, securing the future for those you love and building something that outlasts your limited time on this earth. The anxiety whispers to you in the middle of the night, when the house is quiet and the bills are stacked on the kitchen table, telling you that maybe you are not enough, that maybe God's promises of abundance were not meant for someone like you, that maybe you missed your opportunity or lack the talent or the favor that others seem to have in abundance. You have tried budgeting. You have cut expenses, you have worked extra jobs, and still you find yourself running on a treadmill that goes nowhere, exhausting yourself in pursuit of something that remains perpetually out of reach. But what if I told you that your entire approach has been fundamentally flawed from the very beginning? What if the reason you are exhausted and empty despite all your efforts is not because you are not working hard enough, but because you have been chasing the wrong target altogether? What if everything you have been taught about money, everything our culture screams at you about success, everything that seems obvious and sensible, is actually the very thing that guarantees you will never break? Free from financial bondage? There was a man who understood this truth at a level that few in history have ever grasped, a man who did not just become wealthy, but who built an empire that shaped nations, and whose principles, when properly understood and aligned with biblical wisdom, hold the keys to transforming not just your bank account, but your entire legacy, your purpose, and your capacity to fulfill the calling God has placed upon your life. His name was Rockefeller, and the 12 laws he lived by, the principles that took him from poverty to becoming the wealthiest man in modern history, are not about chasing income, not about working yourself to death, not about the frantic pursuit of the next paycheck. They are about something far more powerful, far more aligned with the way God designed prosperity to function, and far more accessible to you right now, in this moment, than you have ever imagined. These are not the laws of greed or selfishness or worldly ambition disconnected from faith, but rather the very principles woven into the fabric of creation itself, the same principles that built Solomon's temple, that multiplied the widow's oil, that took Joseph from a pit to a palace, principles that, when combined with surrendered faith and divine purpose, become an unstoppable force for the building of wealth that serves, provides, and glorifies. The first and most fundamental law that Rockefeller understood, the cornerstone upon which every other principle rests, is this: income is not wealth. Let that settle into your mind because it contradicts everything you have been conditioned to believe. Our entire system is designed to make you think that the solution to your financial problems is more income, that if you could just make more money per hour, per month, per year, your troubles would disappear, and prosperity would be yours. But this is a lie, a sophisticated trap that keeps generation after generation enslaved to the same cycle of scarcity, despite increasing incomes. Rockefeller understood that chasing income is like trying to fill a bucket with holes in the bottom. No matter how much you pour in, it will never be full, it will never be enough, because income flows through your hands and disappears. Income pays for today's expenses, and tomorrow it is gone, requiring you to go back to the well again and again, forever dependent on your ability to produce more, forever one illness or one setback away from disaster. This is not freedom. This is not abundance. This is not the prosperity that Scripture speaks of when it talks about a land flowing with milk and honey, about storehouses overflowing, about leaving an inheritance to your children's children. Income is temporary, income is fragile, income requires your constant personal effort, and the moment you stop, it stops. Wealth, on the other hand, is something entirely different. Wealth is what you own, what produces for you even while you sleep, what grows and compounds and works on your behalf, whether you are in the office or on the mission field or lying in a hospital bed. Wealth is assets, systems, businesses, investments, properties, intellectual property, anything that generates value independently of your direct labor. Rockefeller did not chase paychecks. He built oil refineries and distribution networks and transportation systems and entire industries that made money whether he personally showed up or not. He understood that the path to true financial freedom is not found in trading your time for money at a higher rate, but in building assets that produce income for you, assets that appreciate over time, assets that can be passed to the next generation, and continue blessing long after you have gone to be with the Lord. This distinction between income and wealth is not just a financial technicality, it is a spiritual principle, deeply rooted in biblical wisdom. When God gave Adam dominion over the garden, He was not giving him a job. He was giving him ownership, stewardship over assets that would produce abundantly. When God prospered Abraham, He did not give him a higher salary. He gave him livestock and land and servants and systems that generated ongoing wealth. When Jesus taught about stewardship in the parable of the talents, He was not praising the servants who worked harder or longer hours. He was praising those who took what they were given and multiplied it, who built something that produced returns beyond their own personal effort. The mindset of chasing income is the mindset of a servant who will always be dependent on the master's next payment. The mindset of building wealth is the mindset of a son who receives an inheritance and has the authority and responsibility to steward it and multiply it for the glory of the Father and the blessing of generations. Too many believers are living like hired hands when God is calling them to live as sons and daughters, with access to the Father's resources and the wisdom to build something that endures. You were not created to be a slave to a paycheck. You were created to be a builder, a creator, a steward of resources that advance the kingdom and provide for those under your care. But you cannot build wealth while you are trapped in the endless race for more income. You must shift your focus, redirect your energy, change the very goal you are pursuing. And this shift begins with the second law. The second law Rockefeller lived by was this: live substantially below your means, not to hoard, but to invest. This sounds simple, but it strikes at the heart of why most people never accumulate wealth, no matter how much they earn. Our culture is designed to expand your lifestyle in perfect proportion to your income, ensuring that you always need just a little more than you currently make. You get a raise and immediately your expenses rise to match it. You earn more and suddenly you need a bigger house, a newer car, more expensive clothes, more elaborate vacations. This is not accidental. This is the system working exactly as designed to keep you dependent, to keep you running, to ensure that you never have anything left over to build real wealth. Rockefeller lived in a modest home even when he was one of the wealthiest men alive. He wore simple suits. He did not chase status symbols or try to impress others with displays of wealth. This was not because he was cheap or did not appreciate quality, but because he understood something profound. Every dollar spent on consumption is a dollar that cannot be used to build wealth, and wealth builds wealth in ways that income never can. When you live below your means, when you resist the pressure to inflate your lifestyle with every increase in income, you create something precious and powerful: margin. Margin is the space between what you earn and what you spend. Margin is the seed capital for building wealth. Margin is what separates those who will live paycheck to paycheck forever from those who will eventually break free and build something that produces for generations. But here is where most teaching on this topic stops and where it completely misses the point. Living below your means is not about deprivation. It is not about living in scarcity or denying yourself good things or feeling guilty every time you spend money. This is not about becoming a miser who hoards every penny and refuses to enjoy the blessings God provides. That is religion, not wisdom. That is fear, not faith. The purpose of living below your means is not to have less, but to have margin that can be strategically deployed into assets that produce more. Rockefeller was not saving money to let it sit in a bank account earning nothing. He was creating margin so that he could invest in oil refinery, so that he could buy out competitors, so that he could build infrastructure, so that he could acquire income-producing assets that would multiply his wealth exponentially. Every dollar he did not spend on lifestyle inflation was a dollar that could be put to work building his empire. This is the crucial distinction. Frugality without investment is just poverty with a nicer name. Frugality with strategic investment is the pathway to multi-generational wealth. You must live below your means, yes, but you must do so with clear purpose and intentionality, knowing that the margin you create is not being sacrificed, but rather being deployed into battle, sent out like soldiers to capture territory and bring back spoils. From a biblical perspective, this principle aligns perfectly with the concept of sowing and reaping. You cannot reap a harvest if you consume all your seed. You cannot expect multiplication if you spend everything that comes into your hands. The Proverbs are filled with wisdom about the person who saves versus the person who spends all, about the wise person who sees trouble coming and takes action versus the fool who keeps going and suffers. Living below your means is not about fear of the future. It is about wisdom in stewarding the present in a way that honors God and builds for the generations He has entrusted to your care. It is about having the discipline to say no to immediate gratification in service of a larger vision. It is about recognizing that you are not just responsible for this month's bills, but for the legacy you will leave, for the impact you can have, for the resources you can deploy in service of kingdom purposes that extend far beyond your personal comfort. When you live below your means with intentionality, you are exercising faith that God's provision is not meant to be consumed entirely on yourself, but rather to be multiplied and expanded for greater purposes. You are declaring that you trust Him, not just for today's needs, but for the wisdom to build something that serves His purposes and blesses others long after you are gone. The third law builds directly on the foundation of the first two and brings us to the heart of wealth creation. You must acquire assets that appreciate and produce income. This is not optional. This is not for sophisticated investors or people with advanced degrees in finance. This is the non-negotiable core of building wealth, and it is available to anyone who will commit to learning and applying these principles with consistency and faith. Rockefeller did not work harder than other men in the oil industry. He worked differently. He worked smarter. He focused relentlessly on acquiring and controlling assets that other people needed and would pay to use. He bought oil wells, refineries, pipelines, distribution networks, rail cars, every piece of infrastructure that touched the oil business. Each of these assets produced income, but more importantly, each of these assets appreciated in value as the industry grew. He was not trading his time for money. He was building a machine that produced money whether he was personally involved in the daily operations or not. This is the secret that will transform your financial life if you will hear it and act on it. Wealth is built by owning things that make money and go up in value, not by working harder at a job. Let me be very clear about what assets are and what they are not, because there is enormous confusion on this point, and this confusion keeps people trapped. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. That is the only definition that matters when we are talking about building wealth. Your primary residence, the house you live in, is not an asset no matter what anyone has told you. It does not produce income. It requires maintenance, property taxes, insurance, utilities. It takes money out of your pocket every month. It may appreciate in value over time, and that is good, but it is not producing income for you while you own it, so it is not building wealth for you in the way we are discussing. A rental property, on the other hand, is an asset. Someone else pays you rent every month. If you have bought it wisely and managed it well, that rent exceeds your expenses and puts money in your pocket every month, while the property also appreciates in value over time. That is an asset. A business that runs without requiring your constant personal presence is an asset. Stocks and bonds that pay dividends are assets. Intellectual property that generates royalties is an asset. Anything that produces passive income or equity appreciation while you own it is an asset. And building wealth requires you to systematically acquire these types of assets over time. Now I can hear the objections forming in your mind already. You are thinking that you do not have money to buy assets. You are thinking that real estate requires huge down payments, or that starting a business takes capital you do not have, or that investing in the stock market is risky and complicated. You are thinking that these principles might work for someone who already has money, but they do not apply to your situation, to your limited resources, to your current financial reality. But this is exactly the lie that keeps you trapped. And this is where the next several laws come into play, to show you that building wealth is far more accessible than you have been led to believe. The reason you think you cannot acquire assets is because you are still trapped in the income mindset, still believing that the solution is to make more money first, and then maybe someday you will have enough to invest. But that day never comes because as your income increases, so do your expenses, and you remain stuck at zero margin with nothing left to deploy into wealth building. The path forward is not to wait until you have more money. The path forward is to start now, with whatever you have, no matter how small, and to let the power of compounding and strategic focus begin working in your favor. Before I go any further, I need to pause here because I know that what I am sharing is challenging deeply held beliefs about money and success that you have carried for years. I know that part of you is feeling both hopeful and skeptical, excited about the possibility, but uncertain whether this can really work for you, in your situation, with your specific challenges and limitations. And I need you to know that I understand that feeling because I have been there. I have sat where you are sitting, feeling the weight of financial pressure, wondering if freedom was possible, or if it was just a dream sold by people who do not understand real struggle. So I want to ask you something directly, and I want you to really think about this because your answer matters not just to me, but to your own journey, and to others who are watching and listening right now. People who feel alone in their financial struggles, people who think they are the only ones who have not figured it out. What is the single biggest obstacle that is keeping you from building wealth right now? Is it lack of knowledge? Is it fear of making mistakes? Is it the feeling that you do not have enough to start with? Is it past financial failures that have made you gun-shy? Is it the pressure of immediate bills that makes long-term planning feel impossible? I genuinely want to know because understanding your specific barrier is the first step to overcoming it, and your honesty about this struggle is going to help others who are dealing with the same issue feel less alone and more empowered to take action. So here is what I want you to do. Go down to the comments right now and share this with the community. Just write, "My biggest obstacle to building wealth is blank, and I want to overcome it because blank." Fill in those blanks with your real, honest answer. Do not overthink it. Do not try to sound impressive or have the perfect response. Just share your truth because when you do, two things happen. First, you break the silence and shame that so often surrounds financial struggle in the church. And second, you take the first concrete step toward change by acknowledging the specific barrier you need to address. Your comment might be the thing that another person reads and says, "Yes, that is exactly what I am dealing with," and suddenly they do not feel so alone anymore. This is not just about engagement or algorithm. This is about building a community of believers who are done playing small with their finances and ready to step into the abundance and stewardship God designed them for. So take a moment right now, scroll down, and share your biggest obstacle. This is the beginning of your breakthrough, and it starts with honesty. Now let me get back to showing you how to overcome the obstacles that are keeping you stuck, because the fourth law Rockefeller practiced directly addresses the belief that you need a lot of money to start building wealth. The fourth law is this: use other people's money to acquire assets. This is called leverage, and it is one of the most powerful wealth-building tools available, yet it is also one of the most misunderstood and misused principles in personal finance. Let me be very clear about what I mean here because I am not talking about credit card debt to buy consumables or car loans for depreciating vehicle or borrowing money to fund a lifestyle you cannot afford. That is not leverage. That is foolishness. That is the broad path that leads to destruction and financial bondage. When I talk about using other people's money, I am talking about strategically borrowing to acquire income-producing assets, where the income from the asset exceeds the cost of the debt. Rockefeller built his empire largely with borrowed money. He understood that if he could borrow at 5% interest to buy an asset that produced 10% returns, he was creating wealth with money that was not even his. The bank took the risk, and he captured the difference. This is how real estate investors build portfolios worth millions while starting with relatively little capital. They use mortgage financing to acquire rental properties, where the rent covers the mortgage payment and expenses, and over time they build equity while tenants pay down the debt and the property appreciates. This is how business owners expand without waiting years to save up capital. They take strategic loans to buy equipment or inventory or hire staff that will generate more revenue than the cost of the borrowed funds. But here is the critical distinction that you must understand. Leverage amplifies whatever you're doing. If you use leverage to acquire appreciating assets that produce income, you will build wealth faster than you ever could with just your own capital. But if you use leverage to acquire depreciating assets or to fund consumption, you will destroy yourself faster than if you had simply spent only what you had. Leverage is a powerful tool, but like any powerful tool, it can be used for construction or destruction. The wisdom is in knowing when and how to use it. From a biblical perspective, debt is not inherently sinful, but it is inherently risky, and Scripture warns repeatedly about the dangers of debt and the bondage it creates. The borrower is slave to the lender, Proverbs tells us, and this is absolutely true. When you are in debt, you have surrendered a degree of your freedom, and you are obligated to perform regardless of circumstances. This is why you must never use debt casually or carelessly. You must use it strategically, conservatively, only for the acquisition of assets that will produce the income needed to service the debt and generate profit beyond it. You must always have a clear plan for how the debt will be repaid and what happens if things do not go according to plan. You must never bet the farm. Never leverage to the point where one bad month or one unexpected event puts you underwater. Rockefeller was aggressive in using leverage, but he was also meticulous in managing risk. He always maintained sufficient cash reserves. He always ensured that his assets could cover his debts even in difficult times. He never leveraged beyond his ability to weather storms. This combination of aggressive growth through leverage and conservative risk management is what allowed him to survive and thrive through multiple economic panics and downturns that destroyed his competitors. The lesson here is not to be afraid of using other people's money, but to respect it, to use it wisely, to deploy it only into assets that justify the risk, and to always maintain margin for error. When you do this, leverage becomes one of your greatest allies in building wealth because it allows you to acquire and control assets far beyond what your current savings would permit. And those assets begin producing for you immediately, rather than waiting years or decades to save up the full purchase price. Time is one of the most valuable components in wealth building, and leverage, used properly, buys you time by allowing you to act now rather than later. The fifth law flows naturally from the fourth and addresses one of the biggest fears people have about investing and building wealth: the fear of making mistakes, the fear of losing money, the fear of being taken advantage of or making a bad decision. The fifth law is this: become educated and expert in your chosen asset class. Rockefeller did not dabble. He did not spread himself thin across multiple industries trying to catch every opportunity. He became the world's foremost expert in the oil industry. He understood every aspect of the business, from extraction to refining to transportation to distribution. He knew his competitors better than they knew themselves. He understood the cost, the margin, the supply chains, the technology, the regulations, everything. This depth of knowledge gave him an enormous advantage. It allowed him to see opportunities that others missed. It allowed him to avoid traps that destroyed others. It allowed him to negotiate from a position of strength and to make decisions quickly and confidently while others hesitated in uncertainty. Knowledge is not just power. Knowledge is profit. Knowledge is protection. Knowledge turns investing from gambling into strategic wealth building. Most people lose money investing not because investing is inherently risky, but because they invest in things they do not understand. They buy stocks because someone told them it was a good tip. They invest in a business opportunity because it sounded exciting. They purchase real estate in an area they have never visited based on projections from a salesperson. This is not investing. This is gambling, and the house always wins when you gamble. The antidote to this is not to avoid investing altogether, but to commit to becoming genuinely educated and expert in whatever asset class you choose to focus on. If you are going to build wealth through real estate, then study real estate. Read books, take courses, join investment groups, find mentors, analyze deals, visit properties, understand neighborhoods and markets, and financing and property management. Put in the work to actually know what you are doing. If you are going to build wealth through business ownership, then study business. Learn about marketing, sales, operations, finance, team building, systems, everything that makes a business succeed or fail. Do not just jump in because you have an idea. Become expert enough that you can evaluate the idea objectively and execute it effectively. If you are going to invest in the stock market, then learn how to analyze companies, how to read financial statements, how to understand valuation metrics, how to recognize quality businesses versus speculative plays. From a biblical perspective, this principle aligns perfectly with the call to stewardship and the parable of the talents. The servants who were entrusted with wealth were expected to do something with it, not to bury it in the ground out of fear, but also not to be reckless with it. They were expected to use wisdom, to understand the marketplace, to make informed decisions that would multiply what they had been given. This requires learning. This requires study. This requires humility to admit what you do not know, and commitment to gain the knowledge you lack. Too many believers approach finances with a passive hope that God will just make it work out without them having to learn anything or develop any competence, and then they wonder why they keep experiencing lack. God has given you a brain, given you access to knowledge, given you the ability to learn and grow and develop expertise. Using these gifts is not opposed to faith. It is the expression of faith. It is honoring the resources God has entrusted to you by becoming competent to steward them well. You do not need to know everything. You do not need to be an expert in every possible investment category, but you do need to pick one or two areas where you will focus your wealth-building efforts and commit to becoming genuinely knowledgeable and skilled in those areas. The time you invest in education will pay dividends far exceeding the cost in both avoiding mistakes and capturing opportunities. The sixth law is closely related and addresses how you actually implement your knowledge and begin acquiring assets. Think long-term and act with patience. Rockefeller did not get rich quick. He did not chase fads or jump from one opportunity to another, looking for the fast path to wealth. He built his empire systematically over decades, making consistent decisions that compounded over time, staying focused on his strategy even when others were chasing the next shiny object. This is perhaps the hardest lesson for modern people to accept, because we live in a culture of instant gratification, quick results, overnight success stories. We want the wealth without the building process. We want the destination without the journey. We want the compounding without the time. But wealth building does not work that way. Real, lasting, generational wealth is built slowly through consistent application of sound principles over extended periods of time. The magic is not in any individual decision or investment. The magic is in the compounding that happens when good decisions are repeated consistently over years and decades. Consider this. If you invest $1,000 per month into assets that return 10% annually, after 10 years, you will have about $200,000. Not life-changing, but significant. After 20 years, you will have over $700,000. After 30 years, you will have over $2 million. The same monthly investment, the same rate of return, but the difference between 10 years and 30 years is the difference between comfortable and wealthy, and that difference is entirely in the time factor, in the compounding that accelerates in the later years. This is why starting now, even with small amounts, is so critical. This is why thinking long-term is so powerful. Most people never build wealth not because they do not have the ability or the resources, but because they do not have the patience. They invest for a few months or a year or two, and when they do not see dramatic results, they get discouraged and quit, or they chase after something that promises faster returns and lose what they had built. Wealth building is boring. It is repetitive. It is consistent deposits, consistent reinvestment, consistent focus on the fundamentals, month after month, year after year, without drama, without excitement, without shortcuts. From a biblical perspective, patience is a fruit of the Spirit, and it is essential for success in every area of life, including finance. Scripture repeatedly emphasizes the value of steady plodding, of faithfulness in small things over time, of the farmer who waits patiently for the harvest, knowing that it cannot be rushed. The culture screams at you to hurry, to chase quick wins, to jump on trends, to buy lottery tickets, both literal and metaphorical, hoping that somehow you will be the exception who gets rich without the process. But the data is clear and consistent. The overwhelming majority of wealthy people built their wealth slowly through consistent saving, investing, and business building over many years. There are exceptions, of course. There are people who get lucky or catch a once-in-a-generation opportunity. But you cannot build a strategy around being the exception. You must build your strategy around principles that work consistently and reliably, and those principles require time to work their magic. The good news is that time is available to everyone. The question is whether you will use it wisely or waste it chasing fantasies. The seventh law addresses one of the most common traps that destroys wealth even after it has been built. You must protect what you have built through diversification and risk management. Rockefeller understood that concentrating his efforts in building wealth was essential, but once wealth was established, protecting it required spreading risk across different assets and strategies. He did not keep all his wealth in the oil business. He invested in real estate, in banking, in various industries, ensuring that no single disaster could wipe out everything he had built. This principle of diversification is crucial, but it is also widely misunderstood and misapplied. During the wealth-building phase, especially in the early years, you want focus, not diversification. You want to master one or two asset classes and pour your energy and resources into them, rather than spreading yourself so thin that you never become expert at anything. But as wealth accumulates, as your asset base grows, you need to shift toward protection. And protection comes through not having all your eggs in one basket. Think about it this way. If you own one rental property and it burns down, or you have a tenant who destroys it, or the neighborhood declines, you could lose everything. But if you own 10 properties in different areas with different tenant profiles, the risk is spread. If one has a problem, it does not sink you. If you own a business and all your revenue comes from one client, you are extremely vulnerable. Lose that client and your business collapses. But if you have 20 clients, losing one hurts, but does not destroy you. If all your investments are in one stock or one sector, you are gambling on that specific outcome. But if you are invested across multiple quality companies and sectors, you can weather storms that would otherwise devastate you. Diversification is not about trying to own a little bit of everything with no strategy. That is just being scattered. Diversification is about having multiple sources of income and value so that you are not dependent on any single source, so that risk is managed and protection is built in. From a biblical standpoint, this is basic wisdom. Ecclesiastes tells us to divide our portion into 7 or even 8 parts, because we do not know what disaster may come upon the land. This is not about fear or lack of faith. This is about prudence, about recognizing that we live in a fallen world where bad things happen to good people, where circumstances beyond our control can impact even the best-laid plans, and where protecting what God has entrusted to us requires thoughtful strategy. You do not build wealth so that one mistake or one disaster can take it all away. You build with protection in mind, with multiple layers of defense, with redundancy in your income stream. This does not mean being paralyzed by fear or so conservative that you never take any risks. It means being strategic, being thoughtful, having a plan not just for growth but for protection and preservation. The 8th law is about something Rockefeller understood better than almost any businessman in history: the power of systems and leverage through other people. You cannot build significant wealth alone. You cannot do everything yourself. Your time and energy are finite, and if your wealth is capped by what you personally can produce, you will always be limited. Rockefeller built wealth by creating systems that ran without him, and by employing thousands of people who produced value far exceeding what he paid them. This is not exploitation. This is multiplication. When you create a system or a business that provides value, that employs others and pays them fairly for their work, and that produces profit beyond the direct labor cost, you have created a wealth-building machine. Every successful business operates on this principle. The business owner is not doing all the work. The business owner has created systems, hired people, built processes that allow the business to serve customers and generate profit at scale. The income the business produces is not capped by the owner's personal hours or energy. It is capped only by the effectiveness of the systems and the size of the market. This is a crucial shift in thinking because most people trade time for money in a job, and they hit a ceiling. There are only so many hours in a day, only so much energy you have, only so much you can personally produce. But when you shift to building systems and leveraging other people's time and talent, the ceiling disappears. Now you can scale. Now you can grow. Now you can build something that produces far beyond what you individually could ever produce. This applies whether you are building a traditional business, investing in franchises or existing business, building online systems that produce passive income, or creating any structure where value is delivered through processes and people rather than just your direct effort. The key is to always be thinking about how to systematize, how to remove yourself from being the bottleneck, how to create processes that can be repeated and scaled and managed by others. From a biblical perspective, this aligns with the principle of stewardship and multiplication. When Jesus told the parable of the talents, the servants who multiplied what they were given were praised. They did not just work harder themselves, they put the money to work. They engaged in commerce. They created systems where the capital produced returns. In the same way, you are called not just to labor with your own hands, but to be a steward who multiplies resources, who creates value that serves others, and provides employment, and generates abundance beyond what you alone could produce. This is not about getting rich at other people's expense. This is about creating genuine value in the marketplace that blesses everyone involved: employees who receive fair compensation, customers who receive products or services they value, and you who receive profit that can be reinvested and grown and used for kingdom purposes. Building wealth through systems and people is not opposed to biblical principles. It is the fulfillment of the creation mandate to be fruitful and multiply and have dominion, to take what God has given and cause it to grow and produce and bless. The ninth law addresses the temptation that destroys more wealth than perhaps any other single factor. You must avoid lifestyle inflation and the trap of appearing wealthy rather than being wealthy. Rockefeller could have lived in the most expensive mansion, driven the fanciest carriages, worn the most extravagant clothes, but he did not. He lived modestly even as his wealth grew into the hundreds of millions. He understood that there is a massive difference between looking rich and being rich, and that most people who look rich are actually broke, while most truly wealthy people live far below their means. This is counterintuitive to everything our culture teaches. Our culture measures success by visible consumption, by the size of your house and the brand of your car and the labels on your clothes. But these are terrible measures of actual wealth, because they represent money that has been spent rather than money that is producing. Every dollar you spend on lifestyle is a dollar that cannot build wealth. And the trap is that as you earn more, the temptation to spend more grows proportionally. You get a raise and immediately you think you deserve a nicer car. You close a big deal, and you convince yourself you need to upgrade your house. You have a good year, and suddenly you are spending on luxuries that a year ago you would have considered completely unnecessary. This is the hedonic treadmill, and it ensures that no matter how much you make, you always feel like you need more, because your lifestyle expands to consume whatever you earn. The truly wealthy resist this temptation. They keep their lifestyle relatively fixed even as their income and wealth grow, and the margin that is created becomes available for investment and wealth building and generosity. This does not mean living like a pauper. This does not mean never enjoying nice things or never upgrading your quality of life. But it does mean being extremely intentional about lifestyle decisions and recognizing that every lifestyle increase is a permanent increase in your expense base, a permanent reduction in your wealth-building capacity, a permanent raising of the income level required just to maintain your current standard of living. The question you must ask with every lifestyle decision is not, "Can I afford this?" but "What is the opportunity cost of this? What wealth could I build if I redirected this money into investments instead of consumption? What legacy could I leave? What impact could I have?" From a biblical perspective, this principle strikes at the heart of what Jesus taught about where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. When you pour your resources into material possessions and lifestyle upgrades, your heart becomes attached to those things. They become your source of identity and security and satisfaction. But when you pour your resources into building assets that produce and grow and can be used for kingdom purposes, your heart is oriented differently. You are not defined by what you consume, but by what you steward. You are not finding your worth in the opinions of others, who judge you by external appearances, but in the calling God has placed on your life to be a faithful steward who multiplies resources for His glory. The Bible does not condemn wealth or nice things, but it consistently warns against the love of money, against finding your identity in possessions, against the trap of materialism that looks like success but is actually bondage. Living below your means as your wealth grows is both a practical wealth-building strategy and a spiritual discipline that keeps your heart oriented correctly. The 10th law addresses a critical component of sustained wealth building that most people completely overlook. You must continuously increase your earning power and value creation ability. Rockefeller did not just build wealth through existing income. He constantly found ways to create more value, to serve more customers, to expand markets, to innovate processes. He understood that stagnation in value creation is death in business, and the same principle applies to personal wealth building. If you are an employee, you must continuously develop skills that make you more valuable in the marketplace. You must become better at what you do, learn new capabilities, take on more responsibility, deliver more results. This increases your income, which increases your margin, which increases your wealth-building capacity. If you are a business owner, you must continuously find ways to serve customers better, to reach new markets, to improve efficiency, to create more value with less input. If you are an investor, you must continuously improve your knowledge and analytical skills so you can identify better opportunities and avoid mistakes. The principle here is that wealth building is not a static formula where you just keep doing the same thing for 30 years. It is a dynamic process where you are constantly growing, constantly improving, constantly finding ways to create more value, and therefore generate more resources that can be deployed into wealth-building activities. This requires investment in yourself, in your education, in your skills, in your health, in your network, in everything that increases your capacity to produce value. Most people stop learning after school. They coast on whatever knowledge and skills they acquired in their 20s, and they wonder why their income plateaus and their opportunities stagnate. The truly successful, the truly wealthy, never stop learning. They read constantly. They seek mentors. They invest in courses and training. They put themselves in rooms with people who challenge and stretch them. They understand that they are their greatest asset, and that investing in themselves produces the highest returns. From a biblical perspective, this aligns with the parable of the talents, where the servants were expected to do something with what they were given, not just maintain it. The servant who buried his talent in the ground, who did nothing to multiply it, was condemned. He was called wicked and lazy because he had opportunity and ability, but he wasted it through inaction and fear. You have been given talents, abilities, intelligence, time, opportunity. What are you doing to develop and multiply those gifts? Are you investing in your own growth, or are you coasting, hoping that what you currently know and can do will be sufficient? The world is changing rapidly. The skills that were valuable 10 years ago may not be valuable tomorrow. The business models that worked in the past may not work in the future. You must be constantly learning, constantly adapting, constantly increasing your capacity to create value in the marketplace, because that capacity is what translates into earning power, which translates into wealth-building potential. The 11th law is perhaps the most controversial, and the one that requires the most wisdom to apply correctly. You must be willing to take calculated risk and make bold moves when opportunity presents itself. Rockefeller was not reckless, but he was bold. When he saw an opportunity to acquire a competitor, or expand into a new market, or invest in new technology, he acted decisively. He did not let fear or excessive caution cause him to miss opportunities that could multiply his wealth. But notice the key word: calculated risk. Not foolish risk, not gambling, not betting everything on a whim, but calculated risks where he had done the research, understood the downside, had a plan for managing the risk, and could see a clear path to significant upside. This requires both courage and wisdom. It requires the ability to evaluate opportunities objectively, rather than emotionally. It requires the discipline to say no to most opportunities so you can say yes to the few that truly have potential. And it requires the confidence that comes from knowledge and experience to act when others are paralyzed by fear. Most people miss wealth-building opportunities not because the opportunities were not there, but because they were too afraid to act. They overestimate the risk and underestimate their ability to manage it. They imagine catastrophic worst-case scenarios while ignoring the very real probability of success. They let fear of failure prevent them from taking actions that could transform their financial future. But here is the truth. Not taking action is also a risk. Staying in a job you hate is a risk. Keeping your money in a savings account earning nothing while inflation erodes its value is a risk. Doing the same thing year after year and hoping somehow your financial situation will magically improve is a risk. The question is not whether you will take risks, but which risks you will take. Will you take the risk of inaction and missed opportunity? Or will you take calculated risks in pursuit of growth and abundance? From a biblical perspective, faith always involves risk. Abraham took a risk leaving his homeland to go to a place he had never seen. Moses took a risk confronting Pharaoh. David took a risk facing Goliath. The disciples took a risk leaving their businesses to follow Jesus. Every great move of God in Scripture involved people who had to step out in faith, who had to take risks, who had to trust God in uncertainty. This does not mean being foolish or presumptuous. This does not mean making reckless decisions and calling it faith. But it does mean that playing it safe, never stepping out, never taking any risks because you might fail, is not faith at all. It is fear disguised as wisdom. God has not given you a spirit of fear, but of power and love and sound judgment. Sound judgment means evaluating risks honestly and preparing accordingly. Power means having the courage to act when the opportunity is right. And love means recognizing that building wealth is not just about you, but about serving others, providing for your family, advancing kingdom purposes, leaving a legacy. When you view risk through that lens, when you understand that God has called you to be a faithful steward who multiplies what has been entrusted to you, calculated risk-taking becomes not something to avoid, but something to embrace as part of your calling. The 12th and final law brings everything full circle and addresses the ultimate purpose of wealth building. You must be generous and use your wealth for purposes beyond yourself. Rockefeller was the greatest philanthropist in American history, giving away the equivalent of hundreds of billions in today's dollars. He built universities, funded medical research, established foundations that continue doing good a century after his death. But his generosity was not just about writing checks at the end of his life. It was woven into his entire philosophy of wealth. He believed that wealth came with responsibility, that those who had been blessed with resources had an obligation to use those resources for the betterment of society and the advancement of worthwhile causes. This is not just morally right. It is also practically wise because generosity keeps your heart oriented correctly, prevents you from becoming consumed by greed or materialism, creates meaning and purpose in your wealth-building efforts, and opens doors and relationships that can lead to even greater opportunities. From a biblical perspective, this is absolutely central. You are called to be a steward, not an owner. Everything you have belongs to God and has been entrusted to you to manage for His purposes. Yes, you are to provide for your family. Yes, you are to enjoy the blessings He gives. But you are also to be generous, to give, to use your resources to advance His kingdom and bless others. The early church was characterized by radical generosity, by believers who shared freely, who cared for the poor and the widows and the orphans, who used their resources to spread the gospel and meet needs. This was not optional. This was the natural expression of hearts transformed by the gospel. When you understand that God has blessed you not just for your own comfort, but to be a conduit of blessing to others, it changes everything about how you view wealth. It gives your wealth-building efforts a purpose far beyond personal enrichment. You are not just trying to get rich. You are building resources so you can have greater impact, so you can give more, so you can serve more, so you can leave a legacy that continues blessing people long after you are gone. Now I recognize that everything I have shared in this message is a lot to process. We have covered 12 laws that govern wealth building, principles that took Rockefeller from nothing to becoming the wealthiest man in modern history, principles that, when aligned with biblical wisdom, become an unstoppable force for building lasting abundance and impact. But knowing these principles intellectually is not enough. You must apply them. You must take action. You must make decisions today, this week, this month, that begin moving you from the cycle of chasing income into the process of building wealth. And I want you to know that you do not have to figure this out alone. This is exactly why I created this channel, to walk with believers who are tired of financial bondage, who are ready to step into the abundance and stewardship God has designed them for, who want to build wealth not for selfish purposes, but to advance the kingdom and bless generations. If what you have heard today resonates with you, if you are ready to stop chasing income and start building real wealth, then I want to invite you to be part of this community. Subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell, because I am committed to consistently sharing content that will equip you with the knowledge, the strategy, the mindset, and the faith-based wisdom you need to transform your financial life. This is not just another finance channel throwing tips at you. This is a community of believers who are applying biblical principles and time-tested strategies to build wealth with purpose and impact. Every video I create is designed to give you practical, actionable content that moves you forward, content that combines financial wisdom with kingdom perspective, content that treats you like an intelligent adult who is capable of learning and applying these principles rather than talking down to you or oversimplifying complex topics. When you subscribe, you are not just getting information. You are joining a movement of Christians who are rejecting the poverty mindset that has held the church back for too long, who are embracing their calling as stewards, who are learning to build wealth that serves and blesses and glorifies God. You are getting access to ongoing training, to deep dives on specific strategies, to case studies and examples and step-by-step guidance on everything from real estate investing to business building to stock market strategy to tax optimization to estate planning to legacy building. You are connecting with others who share your values and your goals, people who will encourage you when you feel discouraged, challenge you when you need it, celebrate with you as you achieve milestones. This is bigger than just watching videos. This is about transforming your relationship with money and stepping into financial freedom with purpose. So go ahead right now and click that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell so you never miss new content. And while you are at it, leave a comment letting me know which of these 12 laws hit home the hardest for you, which one you are most excited to implement, or which one you find most challenging. I read every comment and I use your feedback to create future content that serves you better. Your engagement matters not just for algorithms, but because it helps me understand what you need most, where you are struggling, what content will be most valuable to you as you continue this journey. Everything I have shared today comes down to one fundamental shift. You must stop chasing income and start building wealth. You must stop trading time for money and start creating assets that produce for you. You must stop consuming everything you earn and start investing in your future. You must stop focusing only on today and start building for tomorrow. You must stop letting fear keep you stuck and start taking calculated action. You must stop playing small and start stepping into the abundance God has designed you for. These 12 laws are not theory. They are proven principles that have created more wealth than perhaps any other approach in history. And when you align them with biblical wisdom, when you approach wealth building as a calling and a stewardship, rather than just a means of personal enrichment, they become even more powerful because now they are fueled not just by personal ambition, but by divine purpose. The choice before you is simple, but profound. You can continue doing what you have always done, continue chasing income, continue feeling the frustration of working hard but never getting ahead, continue watching others prosper while you struggle, continue living in the anxiety of paycheck to paycheck existence, or you can make a different choice. You can decide today that enough is enough, that you are done with financial bondage, that you are ready to learn and apply the principles that actually build lasting wealth. You can commit to living below your means not out of poverty mindset, but out of strategic intention to create margin for wealth building. You can start educating yourself in earnest about the asset classes that will form the foundation of your wealth. You can begin acquiring income-producing assets even if you start small, even if it seems insignificant, trusting that consistent action over time compounds into results that will astound you. You can start using leverage wisely to accelerate your wealth building. You can build systems and businesses that multiply your efforts. You can resist lifestyle inflation as your income grows. You can take calculated risks when opportunity presents itself. And you can commit to generosity and purpose in your wealth building so that everything you do serves a kingdom agenda rather than just personal consumption. This is not an overnight transformation. This is not a get-rich-quick scheme. This is a commitment to a different way of thinking and acting that will unfold over years and decades. But I can promise you this: if you will apply these principles with consistency and faith, if you will trust God as the ultimate provider and source, while doing your part as a faithful steward, your financial future will look completely different from your past. You will build wealth that serves you rather than serving wealth. You will create abundance rather than constantly managing scarcity. You will leave a legacy rather than just getting by. You will step into the fullness of what God designed you for financially, not so you can hoard and consume, but so you can give and serve and impact at a level that is impossible when you are trapped in the income chase. The people and causes and kingdom purposes God has placed on your heart require resources to fulfill, and it is not greedy or unspiritual to build those resources. It is obedient. It is faithful. It is the very thing God is calling you to as a steward in His kingdom. So I want to leave you with this final challenge. Take one of these 12 laws, just one, and commit to implementing it this week. Not thinking about it, not planning to do it someday. Actually implementing it. If you are spending everything you earn, create margin this month, even if it is just $50, and immediately put it into an investment account. If you have been avoiding learning about investing, buy a book or take a course this week, and commit to 1 hour per day of financial education. If you have been paralyzed by fear, identify one calculated risk you can take that has clear upside and manageable downside, and take action on it. If lifestyle inflation has been consuming your raises, make one decision to downgrade or delay an upgrade, and redirect that money to wealth building. If you have been operating alone, reach out to find a mentor or join a community of people pursuing similar goals. Just pick one law and act on it this week, and then next week pick another one, and then another, and before you know it, you will have built momentum that transforms everything. Wealth building is not about perfect execution. It is about consistent action in the right direction over time. It is about getting started even when you do not have all the answers. It is about learning as you go, making mistakes, adjusting, and keeping moving forward. It is about trusting God enough to step out in faith while being wise enough to do your homework and make sound decisions. It is about rejecting the lies that say wealth is only for other people, that prosperity is not for you, that you are stuck where you are. You are not stuck. You have just been operating from the wrong playbook. But now you know better. Now you have been exposed to principles that actually work. Now you have no excuse for staying in the same place. The question is, what will you do with what you know? Will you file this away as interesting information and go back to the same patterns? Or will you let this be the turning point, the moment when everything changed, the day you stopped chasing income and started building wealth? The choice is yours, and the time is now. Stop chasing income. Start building wealth. These 12 laws are your blueprint. Go execute them with faith, with wisdom, with consistency, and watch what God does with a faithful steward who is finally operating according to His design for prosperity and abundance. This is your moment. Do not waste it.